Hi, we're joined by Emil, founder and CEO of XOUL. Hi, Emil. How's it going?
Going really well. Thanks for having me, Lisa.
So, XOUL is one of our latest investments coming out of Harvard and Columbia, a multimodal AI entertainment and gaming platform. But really, to understand it, and I think that aha moment is to use it. I know it's in private beta, but I can't wait for people to actually use it. So, why don't you share a little bit about who you are, how you really have always been obsessed with media, and always thinking about the future of media and how you plan to drive that forward with Soul. Um, and yeah, then why don't you share a little bit about the product itself?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'll start with just a little bit about myself. So I grew up in Boston, went to, a public school in Boston as well. I was always incredibly interested in kind of like the intersection of art and technology.
Hmm.
So specifically in high school, what I did was I did a lot of like 3D sculptures and installation work in the visual arts. And then I also combined that with like interest in kind of like fashion, YouTube, and also did very like kind of like preliminary kind of like JavaScript, coding my own apps back in the day. But essentially, um, I kind of like realized that I was obsessed with kind of like consumer from that point and started reading things like Zero to One, right, by Peter Thiel. Really great book on kind of like how you really drive innovation forward. And going into kind of college, I realized that I need to be more technical in order to kind of like make this um, kind of like these passions of mine come true. And so that's when I entered Harvard with a computer science major, right? And also just continued there to be start. I basically um, joined the blockchain club at Harvard and dropped out after my second year to start my first company called Layer N. What we were building was a layer two on top of Ethereum. And that was a very technical project, right? It was actually an infrastructure play in crypto. I realized that the crypto industry, however, was kind of divorced from the end consumer. And so that's when I realized that I really had to pivot away from crypto and to Soul. And so Soul started kind of like as a thought um, back last summer when I was thinking about what are people actually passionate about in the AI space, right? What are real people actually using? And so what I realized was I looked at the data and started talking to users. People aren't really as passionate about kind of like the productive use cases as they were with the kind of like entertainment and more fun use cases, right? And just to give you a few examples of this, um, Hey Pi, for example, was an AI chatbot that was started by Inflection around
Hmm.
2 years ago, right? And
Yeah.
quickly, even though they tried to be kind of like a more mental health and wellness therapist type bot, it quickly actually just became people's friends, right? Another example is that Snapchat's kind of like AI that they integrated into the app was just used as kind of like a chat bot that everyone wanted to confide in as a kind of like private friend they want to have fun with, right? This was also coincided with Sydney's kind of like being Sydney, right, going extremely viral. Everyone talking about how it was incredibly personable, had a lot of personality, right? All these things kind of coincide together, and I realized that the future of AI was really in this intersection of how do we entertain people, how do we make people feel alive with AI, which is actually really paradoxical, right? Because most people think that AI can only help people get things done, but the reality is that I think humans are increasingly lonely today, and also they want more interactive and personalized forms of media, right? And so that's where Soul kind of comes in. Um, I can tell you a little bit more about kind of what we're building, but at a very high level, where this gaming and entertainment platform that allows anyone to create experiences using AI for other people. So obviously, one sort of experience would, for example, be creating a character of another human being or any character they want and putting it up on Soul for anyone else to use, right, in a very social sort of way. And this is sort of the behavior that we have observed has gone viral for example, things like character AI, right? But yeah, at a very high level, we're trying to expand those sort of set of experiences to not only be just involving characters, but also entire plots, entire worlds. And ultimately, for example, you can imagine a world in which we have personalized very interactive, this new form of a mixture of a TV show and a game that people use for entertainment and fun.
Really interesting. So I remember our initial conversations and you saying that this is a sort of an epidemic in this next generation is loneliness, and you plan to really be a leader in the next generation of media. And I think that's a great analogy of a mental health application ultimately turning into a sort of a social application to fight loneliness.
Yeah.
And I think that some people, and if we just sort of push back and say, some people would say, well, adding more digital interaction, does that really promote real human interaction, or does it actually promote more loneliness? Tell us like how you think about how you think about that.
Yeah.
And then we can talk a little bit about uh, the landscape of the AI consumer landscape. Let's quickly, if I could push back a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I think that when we first conceived of Soul, I was kind of thinking about it from the perspective of like, hey, can we create AI companions, right? And I think that approach has been explored and does have its merits, but we realized quickly that like the one-on-one sort of like AI plus one human model was not kind of like sustainable and did not have network effects in the long run, right? And so what that means is that, if I, for example, use an app like Replica or another AI chatting app that's just me and an AI, it's way less high retention, it's way less of an engaging experience, and ultimately it feels pretty isolating, right? But my belief is that when you expand the platform to kind of have these network effects, to kind of be incredibly social, right, and promote these kind of like social sharing features from day one, then you actually create a world in which, hey, we're using AI to augment our personal lives with other humans. And yes, sometimes people can also use it for loneliness, right? If, for example, if their friends are not available in the moment, AI is always going to be there for you, and that's what users are using it for, right? But on like at the same time, they're not isolating themselves by talking to AI. They're actually participating in this process of creating content and sharing it with their friends, which is actually where we see the whole like AI chatbot space moving anyway, just because the proof's kind of like in the data itself as well.
Yeah, so that's a great segue to my next question, which is, what does the landscape of AI consumer look like, and where does Soul fit in? AI consumer is really, a double-edged sword in that once you do get network effects, you do get lock-in, but getting to that retention is super hard, and everyone is really in our world very much focused on that sort of B2B application, right? And to your point of using a sort of a chat GPT to easily build out a product that is one-to-one and not doesn't have network effects is the easy first mover, and we're seeing tons of those sold to B2B, sold B2B, and sold a little bit direct to consumer. But everyone's really waiting for that, what I call that true AI native consumer end-to-end platform. So how do you think about that generally? We can talk about general and then Soul.
Yeah, very, very high level. Definitely agree with everything you said. I think that there's kind of like two sorts of applications that we're seeing in this kind of like consumer AI landscape. One sort of product in the consumer space is kind of like goes easily viral, right? But retention is incredibly hard. And so for example, in this category, I would put, for example, AI photo editors or like AI headshot creators. And these things are incredibly mimetic, right? And they do spread easily between friends. But the hard part is how many days out of a month will a user actually use your platform, right? And that might be 0.1, where you use it once or twice a year, right?
Yeah.
And I think another category that I think ours falls into actually is the category of incredibly high retention apps, which in my opinion, the only kind of like sector that has achieved that is the kind of like AI entertainment and companionship sector, right? And this is kind of like proven by case studies like Character AI, which currently, for example, actually has 20% of the daily queries as Google, right, which is an incredible statistic. But essentially, what they're experiencing in stark contrast, and what we're experiencing as well in our private beta for XOUL, is that these users are, coming back multiple times a day, incredibly passionate about the product. And the issue here is really having the product mind and vision to expand the concentric circle of users to be beyond just a small group of niche kind of like people, right? I think that in general, AI consumer is still in nascency, right? It's very early, and we haven't seen kind of like we haven't seen a kind of like home run type business yet that has managed to integrate the whole stack kind of like end to end and build this wonderful consumer experience. But ultimately, that's kind of like the core of what XOUL is trying to aim for. We're trying to build, we're kind of like a very user first platform, and that started with our inception of looking at what do users actually want out of AI, right? And that took us to, hey, maybe these companionship and entertainment platforms are high retention for a reason. And that led us like today to kind of like believe in this vision of, if we just kind of like make this social network and kind of like network effect and platform available, and destigmatize kind of like using AI for entertainment, that's kind of like where the moat and the really big winner may come from, if that makes sense.
So to pull on a thread that you mentioned earlier, which is leisure use cases of AI will outweigh or be equal to productivity use cases. We're seeing tons of productivity use cases. Can you share a little bit about your thoughts on that? Your thoughts on open source versus closed source, and in general censorship, right? You're in a space that has to deal with all those. So tell us a little bit about your thoughts on how you're using open source, how you're dealing with censorship, privacy, and then the personal use case, which we're seeing less of today versus today.
No, yeah, great questions. I think to hop on the first one about leisure versus kind of like productivity use cases first. I think that if we look at the biggest companies in the world today, a very surprising amount of them are used mainly by consumers who want to be entertained, right? And I think often when we think about startups only in terms of solving problems, it's hard to kind of like grasp at new products that may just push the boundaries of this entertainment kind of like meta forward, right? So the biggest companies, for example, include, for example, YouTube, Netflix, TikTok, Meta, right? All of which are basically built on this kind of like shared human intuition that we just love sharing and telling stories. And at the end of the day, TikTok does not help us get our job done, right? But it kind of like was an incredibly just like poignant app for consumers, just because it used this kind of like hyper personalized AI approach to experiences and media and sharing kind of content with other people. In the same way, we're trying to kind of use AI directly in, I guess, like embed AI directly into the content generation process itself, rather than TikTok, which uses AI only to optimize what you see. So kind of like on that note, that's where we think we really have an edge, and kind of like will be in a position very soon where kind of like you can use ML and AI in a way to just generate the best experiences for human entertainment, right? On the second point, I think the question was open source versus closed source, right? Yeah. I think everyone at the beginning of this AI kind of cycle thought that closed source was going to be most of the value accrual, right? We all thought that OpenAI had an incredible moat that would not be able to be usurped by any other competitor. We all thought that APIs would kind of like accrue a lot of value, right? And what we're seeing play out over the past, especially 6 months, is that this is not true, right? For example, even within the closed source kind of companies, Anthropic's Claude has recently overtaken in some ways in coding, for example, ChatGPT, right? But then very also prominently, Mistral, right, the European startup, that does open source, their models are incredibly kind of like on the level of 3.5. So I think the rough estimate today is that open source is only around maybe 12 to 18 months max behind kind of like the cutting edge in closed source, right? And I only expect that this will continue as a trend with kind of Meta's approach of, well, I guess like the scorched earth approach, where they weren't kind of like the first mover in creating a proprietary model. So they just open source everything, right? And Meta's kind of leading in charge. There's also Mistral. There's a lot of players, I think, that will ultimately push open source forward and are incentivized to. And that's why I do think open source will continue to kind of like approach the progression of closed source. And that's also our thesis here at XOUL. Kind of like we don't have this, for example, this war chest that some AI companies have of like, having $100 million in the bank and be able to create foundational models from scratch. But actually, we do think that's to our advantage, funnily enough, right? I think that a bunch of AI companies at the start thought that they had to create proprietary closed source models in order to be able to compete, right? And what we're seeing is that no, consumers just want the best experience, period. And you can deliver that with open source or closed source. You just need to stitch together all the elements, right? But that actually leads into the next point, which is about censorship, right? So if you look at Netflix, if you look at YouTube, if you look at kind of like any entertainment platform, it's inherent that people don't want limitations on what sort of content they can watch. For example, right, obviously Netflix has all sorts of shows, some including violence, some including blah, blah. And what will happen is that shows / any sort of media will be age restricted and appropriate for the kind of like for the user, right? But what's happening with closed source AI is that there's an incredible amount of censorship, right? And we can see directly users and also companies complain about that level of censorship and that level of kind of like, I guess the company inputting their own opinion into the actual model, right? And that's actually a very kind of negative for the market result. And that's kind of also what we're fundamentally betting against. At XOUL, we're using open source not only because we can host our own models, we have ultimate flexibility, we have customization, right? But also because we're taking a stance against this sort of like, I guess like this incredible amount of censorship that big companies imbue their platforms with.
Yeah, and actually, sort of pull on the Mistral thread. What are your thoughts on the fact that a player like Mistral, very small team, comparative to an OpenAI, has gotten to such a level of performance and throughput? Where do you see open source leaders really being? Is it going to be in the large tech companies? Is it going to continue to be in OpenAI? Do you think
that's a great question.
Where do you see it living?
I think that this is also a general trend in not only like the foundational models, but also like the companies in general, right? So there's often a question in every single kind of like cycle of technology of where the value accrues. And sometimes the value does, for example, mostly accrue to incumbents, and sometimes it mostly accrues to startups. So for example, in mobile kind of like wave, right, the value did accrue to players like Facebook and Google because they were not kind of like underprepared for like mobile, right? They kind of like were easily able to adapt to the mobile space and make their native web platforms mobile friendly. I think AI is different. I think what we're seeing is that even though incumbents are imbuing their products with AI, for example, like Salesforce is making like their whole end-to-end stack more AI. For example, Intercom is like very kind of like AI first, right? All these incumbents are indeed kind of like putting AI on their board meeting pitch decks, right? But I think the reality is that a lot of them are so ossified that they cannot fundamentally create an AI first company. And this is also seen by the example of Mistral, right? So I think an oft repeated thing that we say about companies today is that you're able to generate a lot more value with less employees, because the value that each employee can bring is more when you have, for example, technical things and also just like general workflows enhanced by AI, right? But I also think that's also a testament to how derelict and ossified incumbents can become. Not to say that, obviously like every big company has like incredible amounts of like, they do have incredible amounts of kind of like horsepower, right? And kind of like future forwardness, right? But I think in some ways, bigger companies are less able to innovate. And the ways that I think AI will progress will require fundamental innovation that is impossible for sometimes incumbents to do.
I 1,000% agree. And sort of to my point of seeing a lot of B2B versus AI native consumer companies. And I think that these are the first movers, but the next generation will be full stack. So actually, aside from going on a tangent, let's go back to how you think AI technologies are disrupting the current consumer entertainment landscape. And AI inherently lowers the barrier to entry for user-generated experiences. We're seeing tons of AI video editing, video producing, photo applications, really for first movers around, entrepreneurs who are marketers. But really, how do you see it disrupting the consumer entertainment landscape? Perhaps getting into big box, getting into digital TV. And are we there yet? Or do we need more consumer adoption? So how do you see it?
Yeah. Yeah. I think AI is basically essentially what it's doing right now is it's already in starting to imbue itself in kind of like workflows that people always use, but can now make more efficient, right? So that's the first way that it can kind of do its job, which is, for example, like let's say a production studio or a filmmaker wants to edit its kind of like clips together in the most efficient way, right? There is now kind of like AI enabled technology that enables them to do it seamlessly. I don't think this is the I guess like the interesting use case though. I think the interesting use case is again like kind of like going from 0 to 1 rather than 0 to or like rather than 1 to 100, right? Where we can actually imagine a whole new genre of entertainment modalities, right? And that's kind of what Soul's trying to do. So imagine a platform on which so for example, TikTok hosts videos, right? It's basically just like videos that are short form. Imagine a platform that hosts AI-enabled experiences that, for example, on the fly gives you personalized, individualized kind of like a plot line depending on what you like. So just a concrete example of this, right? Bandersnatch was a Black Mirror episode released, in a few years ago that kind of like enabled the viewers to choose their own adventure within the movie itself, right? Obviously this is not possible at a kind of like at a big scale without AI because you can't have on the time dynamic uh, story generation, right? What Soul is doing is kind of being that platform that envisions a whole new genre of what it means to kind of like tell stories. And that's kind of where I see the entertainment landscape moving in the direction of, hey, not only just use AI to speed up existing workflows, but what if we use AI to just completely reimagine how we share and create stories themselves?
So tell me a little bit about that, and how you plan with Soul to be really that inflection point of creating active, interactive content versus passive content, and really hyper personalized, and user generated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that like in general, the historical trend of entertainment has been from like moving from like centralized top down kind of like one production studio produces a blockbuster film that all of Americans watch, right? To kind of like um really individualized, fragmented, niche kind of like creator led experiences that anyone can share, right? And this is kind of like our thesis on why we're fundamentally a user first content generation platform. We don't think we can come up with the best, most entertaining experiences just because that might mean something so different for everyone, right? What we kind of care about is letting users generate with our AI technology kind of like other experiences for other users, right? And I think, yeah, that's essentially what we plan on doing moving forward. So our first kind of like step towards that is enabling people to create characters slash souls, we call them, of any character, any public figure, any sort of like anime character they like, right? And sharing it with their friends. But very soon, this will move into multiple modalities. So imagine now you can not only chat with a character in text format, you can, for example, talk to them on a call. You can, for example, interact with them in a video. You can, for example, choose which world you want to head in towards with a very simple kind of like, let's say like interface where you can just choose the plot, right? And then that enables basically you to visualize what happens next in this scenario. But essentially, we're kind of like thinking about from a first principles level how to use AI to generate dynamic stories.
So tell us a little bit about just that. What is your 10-year vision for Soul and creating dynamic stories? Do you plan to be more of a Roblox, more of a Disney, and your full vision, your full multimodal vision?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I think that like the kind of like master plan is you first kind of build a platform that users love. And this is what we're doing today with our private beta. And we're getting incredibly good feedback. People saying that we're basically better than any of the incumbents. People saying that essentially, they love our product, right? And going from there, right now we're primarily a text-first platform, right? We want to quickly expand to, for example, not only video generation, but eventually, VR, AR, and fully immersive experiences. And just to kind of like talk a little bit about why we're well positioned to capture or to kind of like capitalize on the multimodal approach. I'll say this, right? So there's a sector of, for example, video generation apps that's coming out that enables you to, for example, go from a text prompt to a video kind of like very, very quickly, right? The thing is, we believe our platform is actually uniquely positioned to capture the sort of video generation, for example, market as well, because we're the ones that have souls slash characters on our platform. And so you can imagine the workflow something like this, right? Let's say a user really likes a character, let's say Dr. House from House MD, and they want to see Dr. House talking with Joe Biden, right? They can go to our platform and instantly write a plot between these two characters, have full context about their personalities from our kind of like user generated character base, and then directly put that into a multimodal format, right? Whereas on other platforms, there's no context about the characters, there's no existing user base, and so it feels like, I guess, more of a one-on-one non-social experience. Whereas our platform inherently encourages kind of like this end-to-end ownership of the character, the dialogue, the plot, and the visuals, right? Which is all kind of like the ingredients of a well-made, for example, movie or story. And so the end vision, like you said, right, is really to create something at the intersection of Roblox, something like Roblox and Disney, right? So Roblox obviously is this platform that where anyone can create a game, right, and anyone else can join that game and just play along with it. In the same way, we really think of it as kind of like we want anyone to be able to create a story and be able to share that experience or story with anyone else. And really, the kind of like end goal is that I do believe this can get close to kind of like simulation technology. So where we simulate entire worlds and entire kind of like social experiences using kind of AI.
So I'm super excited about the vision. So, and I bet everybody on the call is too. So tell us a little bit about why you're going to win, and also, you are funded, who you're hiring. I think you recently moved out to the Bay Area. So anyone that you're, any particular positions that you're keen on first?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think alongside like the reasons I mentioned, like for example, regarding network effects and regarding kind of our vision to end own the stack, right? I think fundamentally Soul as a company, and especially me and my co-founder, are just founders that are incredibly obsessed with the product. And I think that in a world where kind of like, you know, sometimes you get obsessed with sales, right? You get obsessed with marketing, you get obsessed with growth. I think often the best element, the most important ingredient of a obsessive company is still its product. And so that's kind of always been our focus and always will be. And we just want to build fundamentally something that users love. And that means kind of like talking to users every day and just talking to them about what their pain points are and what they like and don't like. Yeah, we're in a very good stage right now. We have around 7 full-time employees, including me and my co-founder, 7 full-time people. And yeah, we're doing a full kind of like hype public launch very soon. We're currently in private beta, but if anyone wants to check out the platform, please feel free to just talk to me, DM me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to share.
DM you or email you?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And are you on LinkedIn and Twitter, or mostly on?
Yeah, Twitter and LinkedIn and all. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I know that we're over time, and so I think that we should circle up when you're in public launch, but want to just share a little bit about XOUL with our community.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay. Awesome. Bye, guys.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Yep.